Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, Minister.
I am pleased to rise today to provide members of this Honorable House an overview of the role and functions of the Labor Advisory Council and the work that it will commence in 2022. Mr. Speaker, the LAC was established in the 1960s in response to the labor and social unrest that was taking place during that time. It is a non-statutory tripartite government board tasked with advancing industrial relations and garnering consensus amongst its members to make recommendations concerning legislative amendments, policies, and standards regarding Bermuda's labor force. The LAC is chaired by the Minister of Labor and comprises of representatives from government, employer groups, and worker groups as equal and independent partners together seeking solutions to issues facing Bermuda's labor force through social dialogue. This form of social dialogue is referred to as tripartitism, and it is extremely effective as it allows for the views of each side to be taken into consideration when decisions are made, leading to more favorable outcomes for all stakeholders involved. Mr. Speaker, the LAC meets quarterly and has the ability to meet more frequently where necessary. Subcommittees of the LAC meet more regularly. The LAC will reconvene quarterly meetings in January 2022 and has a robust agenda that I will now share with the members of this Honorable House. The agenda includes, but not limited to, further amendments to the Employment Act 2000, guidance on independent contractor contracts, and inequalities in the world of work. Mr. Speaker, further amendments to the Employment Act. The Ministry has identified areas within the Employment Act 2000 where further strengthening of workplace protection is required. The LAC will be asked to review and opine on a policy document in this regard, which includes, but is not limited to, the following areas. A requirement to notify the Ministry of Labor where an employer intends to engage in a mass termination of more than 20 persons. This will enable the Ministry to provide the necessary assistance in a timely manner to employers as it relates to compliance with the Act, as well as to employees as it relates to seeking alternative employment and or returning them for the labor force. Determining what constitutes end of layoff period. This will ensure that when recalling employees to work, there are measures in place that protect employees from consecutive layoff periods and clearly defining the end of the layoff period. The publication of employment standards. This will ensure that all employed persons, particularly work permit holders, are aware of their rights and obligations under the Act and who they may contact for assistance. Workplace inspections by the Labor Relations Manager. This will ensure that employers maintain adequate employment records in accordance with the Act and that employees have the appropriate access. Wage back protection. This will strengthen employee protections, ensuring that there are adequate provisions to protect employees from employers who fail to pay employees for all hours worked, fail to make appropriate overtime payments, fail to allocate tips to employees, and illegally deduct or fail to make the appropriate statutory benefit payments. Mr. Speaker, provide guidance on independent contractor contracts. The Ministry has received a number of concerns from workers and members of the public pertaining to unfair contractual terms and employment contracts that seem to take advantage of the current economic climate in Bermuda and persons' inability to find suitable and sustainable employment. The Act was amended to address this long-standing issue and allows for the manager of the Labor Relations Section, in consultation with the Labor Advisory Council, to issue guidance for the purpose of determining whether an employment relationship more closely resembles that of an employee than an independent contractor. The LAC will consider this issue and determine whether it is necessary to issue guidance in this regard and the contents of the same. Mr. Speaker, On the 23rd of November 2021, I attended the International Labour Organization Caribbean Labour Ministers meeting in preparation for the 109th session of the International Labour Conference. The LAC will review and consider the report submitted to the 109th session of the International Labour Conference entitled Inequalities and the World of Work. The LAC will consider this report as it relates to Bermuda and will seek to address the following areas: economic and social implications of inequality in the workplace, the main drivers of inequality inside of the labor market, and what effective, responsive policies and measures should be introduced to reduce inequality and promote productivity, including in the context of the recovery from the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the ministry would like to take this opportunity to thank members of this honorable House for the opportunity